Isaiah Ford is coming off the first 1,000-yard campaign at receiver in the history of Virginia Tech football. He looks to do even better here in 2016. We're talking ACC football with Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC. And breaking down positional units, we stop in Blacksburg at wide receiver. And Mike, despite a marginalized passing game in 2015, we're looking at three very productive receivers in Isaiah Ford, of course, the star, but Cam Phillips also, and Bucky Hodges, arguably the best tight end in the conference as well.
I was going to say it's pretty interesting you say it was a marginalized passing game because, you know, I think with all the injuries they had, it was definitely not what Hokies fans were hoping for or expecting when Brendan Motley all of a sudden was your team's quarterback for nearly 3/4 of the season. Michael Brewer gets hurt, obviously, in the first game of the year against Ohio State, breaking his collarbone. And now all of a sudden, what are the receivers going to do, right? So you have Bucky Hodges coming off of a huge year as a redshirt freshman, really a huge coming out party in the Ohio State game in Columbus, catching that big-time touchdown pass in the second half to put the Hokies ahead. And then he went on to have a great 2014 campaign. Isaiah Ford, we knew he had all the talent in the world. It was just a matter of him harnessing it, getting a quarterback play was a little bit more consistent. And last year, he became the go-to target, Isaiah Ford did, not only for Michael Brewer when he, of course, played in the opener and then later on in the season when he came back healthy, but Brendan Motley saw Isaiah Ford as kind of a go-to guy for most of the season. And Isaiah Ford's been rewarded, obviously, first 1,000-yard receiver in Virginia Tech history, which is pretty hard to believe considering some of the quarterbacks they've had at Tech. 75 catches, 1,100 yards last year, and 11 touchdowns. Sky's the limit. He's definitely a surefire professional prospect when he comes out, has the speed. He's starting to put on a little bit more muscle as well. An excellent route runner, a very good run blocker, a guy that kind of does a little bit of everything for that Virginia Tech offense. Was just named 2016 preseason All-ACC. That's quite the high regard considering the fact that the receivers in the ACC are very good, especially when looking at Clemson and Florida State. So Isaiah Ford, primed to have another big year for Virginia Tech. He's definitely, once again, coming into his junior year as the go-to #1 receiver. If he has another year this year like he had last year, and I expect that he will if he stays healthy, just because the offense will be a little bit more revitalized and revamped, more of a pass-happy attack. If Ford has a year similar to the year he had last year, I think he's definitely a candidate to leave early and go to the NFL. He's just that good. Cam Phillips is another guy, same class as Isaiah Ford, heading into his junior year. Came on really nicely once again last year, 49 catches for 582 yards, only 2 touchdowns. Ford got a lot of the touchdown passes there last year for the Hokies, but Cam Phillips had some huge catches for the Virginia Tech offense at times last year when they were really needed. A lot of big-time third down catches that definitely didn't go unnoticed. Bucky Hodges spoke a little bit about him there at the top. Obviously, a big year 2 years ago. Last year, a little bit more of a disappointment just because the expectations were so astronomically high for him heading into his redshirt sophomore season. But the thing for Bucky was if he had a year last year like he had a couple of years back when he was a redshirt freshman, he was probably going to head off to the NFL after last season, having his 3 years of college under his belt. Ended up only catching 40 passes for 530 yards and 6 touchdowns. It was a good year for Bucky Hodges, but when considering the year he had in 2014, it was kind of a little bit of a step back, especially when considering the quarterback play with Virginia Tech, the fact that they were giving a little bit more attention to Bucky Hodges than they would have maybe previously. It's pretty easy if you lock down Bucky Hodges and then give a lot of attention to Isaiah Ford. Virginia Tech's only real receiver was Cam Phillips, and that's something that Virginia Tech will have to do moving forward, is just find another guy that they can target. One guy I want to mention here, Mark, at the tight end position specifically. I mean, I know we talk about Bucky Hodges. He splits out in more of a receiver role more than anything else, but I think if they're going to go to a traditional tight end, Chris Durkin is a guy to watch. Former quarterback at Virginia Tech, Chris Durkin's going to come in, play a little bit of tight end, decided to make the positional switch just because of the depth at quarterback was where it was. You know, Chris Durkin was going to have a hard time ever getting on the field if he didn't make a positional switch. In the spring, had very good hands. The coaches raved about him in practice. He stepped in, was blocking very well. Does a little bit of everything. Does a little bit of everything well at tight end. He's going to be raw just because this will be his first year playing tight end in his collegiate career, but he's a guy who could definitely make a difference. Soft hands, could potentially make some noise in the passing game. Kind of an under the radar target to watch if you're looking for kind of a depth guy for Virginia Tech, a fourth or fifth pass catcher type. I think Chris Durkin can make some noise. A guy will definitely fly under the radar heading into next season for the Hokies.
And just to get back to Ford, when the quarterback situation did stabilize, Brewer came back. He finished with a flurry. Speaking of Isaiah Ford, 155 yards in that loss to North Carolina, 121 against Virginia, and then avoiding the embarrassment of what could have been that bowl game against Tulsa as a heavy favorite, 12 for 227 and 1 touchdown. Just a remarkable bowl game for Isaiah Ford against Tulsa. All right. Plenty of depth, not necessarily guys that you want to see get into the mix too much because of the 3 guys that should provide most of the production, but Divine Diablo, a 21st rated wide receiver coming out in 2016 out of Winston-Salem. Samuel Denmark, also pretty highly touted out of South Carolina, and Eric Kuma, 68th rated wide receiver out of Woodbridge, Virginia. Also some other guys that could possibly be needed in 4 wide receiver sets.
Mark, I'm glad you dropped the Woodbridge reference, my hometown. Yeah, so Eric Kuma is a big-time player. Actually went to the high school right up here in my neighborhood. Big-time player in high school, did a little bit of everything. I'm just going to talk about him a little bit more extensively just because, I've seen him. Makes plays in the return game, played safety in high school, and was one of the best receivers, not only in this area right by me, but in the state as well. So Virginia Tech got a good one, a guy that wasn't only looking at Virginia Tech. He was looking elsewhere, getting a lot of attention, but he decided to stick in state. So it's a good get for Virginia Tech as a depth option. Not sure he'll make a huge difference this year, but he's a guy who can definitely make an impact down the road. A couple other guys you mentioned, Divine Diablo, Samuel Denmark, both true freshmen, guys that had pretty good springs, were both extremely raw. Another guy to watch is Jalen Bradshaw. He's coming into his second year at Virginia Tech. He redshirted last year, but he had a very good spring. The coaches are really excited about what he brings to the table. If you're looking for a third true receiver, so, if we group Bucky Hodges as a tight end for argument's sake, and we have Isaiah Ford, Cam Phillips, and you're looking for who at the third receiver position, Jalen Bradshaw is definitely a guy we're going to have to watch just because the coaches are really high on him. Virginia Tech's going to throw the ball a ton, and if Bradshaw is as good at running his routes as the coaches suggest, it will be a welcomed addition as a third option in the passing game at the receiver position for Virginia Tech. So everybody wants to talk about Ford, Phillips, Bucky Hodges, and rightfully so. But if we want another young receiver who I think can make an impact right away this upcoming season, I think Jalen Bradshaw is a pretty good candidate.
It's definitely an under-the-radar receiving core. If you look across the country, few people would cite Virginia Tech as having one of the best in the conference, let alone the country. But if you really look at it, Isaiah Ford, one of the best in the business. Cam Phillips, certainly a solid number 2. Bucky Hodges, that security blanket, classic security blanket for a quarterback kind of down the seam, and a number of interesting possibilities as prospects in the passing game as well, looking at Diablo, Denmark, and some of the other guys that you mentioned. Virginia Tech at wide receiver, Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC, breaking it down. Thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, thanks, Mark.